Dear students, as we have discussed in the previous classes, in a free enterprise economy, prices are determined in the market by the forces of demand and supply. Demand curve is negatively sloped and the supply curve is positively sloped. But we have not proved the negative slope of the demand curve. And remember this, it is the consumer who is behind the demand for goods and services. So in order to understand the nature of demand, why the demand curve is negatively sloped, etc., we have to analyze the behavior of the consumer. And the analysis of the behavior of the consumer is the subject matter of the theory of consumer behavior. Before explaining the theories of consumer behavior, let us consider a few preliminaries. We start with the concept of utility. The concept of utility. So remember this, the study of the behavior of the consumer is a prerequisite to study the demand for goods and services. And we assume that the aim of a consumer is maximization of utility. The theory of consumer behavior is concerned with how a consumer maximizes his utility given the prices of goods and services on the one hand and the money income of the consumer on the other. A consumer, given his money income and prices of goods and services, purchases various quantities on the basis of his tastes and preferences. On the basis of his tastes and preferences. And if a consumer purchases a unit of X than a unit of Y, then we can reasonably conclude that utility received from X is greater than utility received from Y. The concept of utility and the related issues will be discussed in detail. So, if the aim of the consumer is maximization of utility by purchasing various quantities of goods and services available, given the prices of goods and services, the money income of the consumer, then he purchases goods and services on the basis of his tastes and preferences. And we will say that our consumer desires a unit of X over a unit of Y because utility from X is greater than utility from a unit of y. So the question is, what is utility? In simple words, utility is the want satisfying power of a commodity. Utility is the want satisfying power of a commodity. So a consumer purchases goods and services in order to maximize his utility or satisfaction given the prices of goods and services and also the limited money income of the consumer. And his purchases given the prices and income is based on his tastes and preferences. And the tastes and preferences depends on the satisfaction received from consuming each unit of the commodity. And utility is nothing but the satisfaction received from consuming a commodity. Now, in the literature, utility is defined in two ways. One is cardinal utility. Cardinal utility. The other one is ordinal utility. Utility is defined in cardinal terms and also ordinal terms. Cardinal and ordinal are taken from the vocabulary of mathematics. Now, the numbers such as 1, 2, 3, etc. are cardinal numbers, whereas the numbers such as first, second, third, etc. are ordinal numbers. Cardinal numbers, ordinal numbers. The difference between these two is, in the case of cardinal numbers, we know that 2 is twice 1 or 3 is 1 more than 2. That means in the case of cardinal numbers, size relation between the numbers is given or known. Size relation between the numbers is known in the case of cardinal numbers. Ordinal numbers, on the other hand, are ranked numbers. Ordinal numbers are ranked numbers. As such, the size relation between the numbers is not known. Ordinal numbers are first, second, third, etc. They are ranked numbers. Now, it is possible that first, second, third may be 10, 20 or 30. Or it may be that it is 10, 11 and 20. So they are ranked numbers. Size relation is not clear. What is known to us is that first is greater than second, second is greater than third, like that. The only thing known to us is first is greater than second, second is greater than third, like that. Such numbers are known as ordinal numbers or ranked numbers. Now, if you define utility as cardinal utility, it means that utility is measurable. Defining utility as cardinal utility means utility is measurable, and a unit of measurement used for this purpose is utils, a psychological number, utils, and it is measured in monetary terms. If you assume that utility is cardinal, measurable, then the utility from consuming a unit is equal to the price you are willing to pay for the commodity. Then, if you define utility as ordinal utility, What you can say is, you can say that utility received from X is greater than utility received from Y, or vice versa. Utility received from consuming a unit of X is greater than utility received from consuming a unit of Y, and vice versa. That is all. But you cannot compare quantities of utilities. Quantities of utilities. So these are the two conceptualizations. When the concept of utility was introduced earlier, classical economists assumed that utility is measurable. A person is able to quantify the utility received from consuming a unit of the commodity. But later it was recognized that utility is a subjective psychological phenomena, and as such it is not measurable. What is possible is, you can say whether you get more utility from a unit of X than a unit of Y. That is all. And another concept is total utility versus marginal utility. Total utility versus marginal utility. Now, total utility is defined as the overall satisfaction that an individual receives, the overall satisfaction that an individual receives from consuming a specified quantity of a commodity per unit of time. That is the total utility received from consuming a specified quantity. That is total utility. And the marginal utility is the per unit change in total utility received from consuming one more unit of the commodity. So we can write marginal utility of the nth unit as total utility of the nth unit minus total utility of n minus 1 unit, or simply as marginal utility is equal to change in total utility by change in quantity. Marginal utility is per unit change in, or it is defined as the utility received from consuming an extra unit. It is the addition to total utility from consuming an additional unit. It is TUN minus 1, or it is simply change in total utility divided by change in quantity. And so remember this utility, cardinal versus ordinal utility, then total utility versus marginal utility. Now the theory of consumer behavior, as I told you in the beginning, is concerned with the derivation of individual demand for a commodity. We have stated earlier that there is an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded, but we have not proved it. Since there is a consumer behind the demand curve, and since the consumer is supposed to purchase more when price decreases, we have to analyze the behavior of the consumer to establish the law of demand, to establish the fact that demand curve is negatively sloped. So theory of consumer behavior is concerned with the derivation of individual demand curve and an explanation of its shape, slope, etc. So the only concern of the theory of consumer behavior, remember, is derivation of individual demand curve to establish that the demand curve is negatively sloped. Now there are two approaches to the demand theory. depending on how you define utility. If you define utility as cardinal utility, then we have a cardinal utility theory, also known as the neoclassical theory, Marshallian utility analysis. The second one is ordinal utility theory, based on the conceptualization that utility is ordinal, also known as indifference curve analysis. So basically there are two approaches to the theory of consumer behavior. One is the cardinal utility theory, the other one is the ordinal utility theory. There is also a third approach that is known as revealed preference hypothesis. Revealed preference hypothesis. Even though it is a distinct theory of consumer behavior, it is generally considered as a refinement of ordinal utility theory. So, two basic approaches. The third one is considered as a refinement of ordinal utility theory. So, in the next two classes, we will study the cardinal utility theory. Even though it is not very important, we just consider it because of its historical interest only, not very important. Nowadays, the theory of consumer behavior is ordinal utility theory, also known as indifference curve analysis. So, our discussion will be mainly based on ordinal utility theory, and we explain cardinal utility theory just from the perspective of historical interest only. Then we will discuss revealed preference hypothesis also.